Good morning. Very pleased to be with you, and thanks, friend, for these introductions. Please, when you look at me, don't look just at as a classical white, bald man, but try also to think about a man which is dealing with humanitarian issues. On one hand, we do, as an organization, I'm the lead of the International Red Cross, so we do focus, of course, on people, community affected by war, by other situations of violence, by major disaster around the world. So you will see us in Syria, in Sudan, in Yemen, in Ukraine, in Myanmar, for example. But also think and look at me also as somebody who has the responsibility to also think about what frame wars. Because in fact, my organization, the International Committee of the Red Cross, has a mandate to develop international humanitarian law, which is the law who, in fact, regulates war. And of course, in our world, in my world, artificial intelligence, data, technology, system, let's call it AI for simplicity, has already changed our landscape. And that's why it's so interesting to see you today, and it's interesting also to reflect about the AI for good, and how much, and how much potential there is to do good, to contribute to the SDG, no doubt on that one, but also what are the risks, what are the questions. And I really would like to start with one element. When we think AI, for us, we experience it through first data, and the data of the people. You need to know maybe that as an organization, we are visiting between 700,000 to 800,000 prisoners around the world. This is part of our mandate. And when I'm visiting a prisoner, let's imagine that we are in prison right now. When you are a prisoner, you have no chance. You are stuck in a place with guards, and your only way to be maybe protected is to count on your lawyer, if you have a lawyer, to count maybe on the behavior of the guards, and sometimes it's very complex, or to count on us, the ICRC. So when I'm visiting prisoner, what I would do, I would select some of you, I would sit with you in a private interview, and I would ask you to give me your data, your personal data, where you're coming from, what happens to you, have been tortured, what is your family, who are they? Very intimate, very private data. And of course, when I'm doing that, we are creating a social contract between you and me. And I think you count on us to treat this data with full integrity. You count on us to be able to manage this data in order this data is not owned, shared with others. And it's interesting, if you look at the data questions, we've done that since the beginning of our mission. 150 years ago, we were doing that, registering people like that. And what I found interesting even today, for us, being able to look somebody in his eyes and says, yes, I can guarantee you that your data will be controlled only by us, and nobody will check, have access to the data without our assent and without also your agreement, is more difficult than it was 100 years ago. So for us, the first thing when we talk about data, we had to really rethink about how do we protect your data? How do you protect the data of people? What is the common grammar that you're creating today with people? That's the first things when we think about data, being able as an organization to be very much aware about the way you're managing data, aware of the rights, of the standards. It sounds basic, but critical in a humanitarian environment. The second point when it comes to data, we've seen over the last few years that people around the world, you can be in Somalia, in Syria, in Yemen, in Congo, or in other countries anyway, people are connected, they have mobile phone, and very clearly people more and more are aware of the importance of their data. And if you're living in an environment which is violent, complex, you are aware that your data and the ability to manage your data on your own starts to be a question of life or death. And we've seen over the last few years that people are looking more and more about the way data are managed as a humanitarian need. We as an organization are more and more challenged, and the request is much more clear today that tomorrow we will be an organization as complex maybe or as good as Google, but at least when it comes to manage private data of people in very unsecure environments, most likely That will be one of our tasks over the next coming years. Not because we are technology savvy, but because we are possibly an organization who still is generating trust. And trust will be very central when it comes to data. Who attract data, who is ready to give the data, especially in situation of violence or in situation of crisis. The third element of data, what we've seen, and of course we had to do that over the last years, is to be able to use big data more and more, to use algorithm in order to improve our own ability to read the needs of the people. That is possible. We've learned that, we've done that. We've done that in complementary to our own work in the ground. So on the ground, I have my team being able to assess the need, very critical for us, in a very impartial way. Where are the needs? Not if the needs are based on a political or ethnical perspective, really, what are the needs? And using big data and algorithm have been very, very central for us to improve our ability to read very quickly where are the water sanitation problems, where is the health issues. If you take big data, if you look at all the agglomeration of tweets, for example, it has been very helpful for us to be able to look into that. But again, even there, or what seems very basic and very easy and no complexity, which is to use, in fact, big data algorithm in order to improve your response, we had already ourselves questions about what type of algorithm are we using? What are the bias? Do we use algorithm which allows us, as a result, to have an absolute impartial read of the needs of the people? It was an interesting question which obliged us to work with an ecosystem, academic institutions, to somewhat construct our own algorithm in order to make sure there was no bias. So already, even in a very simple technology, we had to reflect about how do you integrate principle in technology, in design technology. My last point, of course, when you think AI, you have not only to think about when you work in war, in humanitarian crisis, you don't have to think only about you and the relationship that you have with people and the importance of data. You do have, of course, to think about weapons. What type of weapons are used today in a conflict? And you certainly know that war are not fought anymore as we were used to it. Remember Iraq? Remember Afghanistan? We almost felt that was very modern. It's only 10 years ago. This war, our world war of the 20th century. Government will not send now hundreds of thousands of soldiers on the ground. It's too expensive. It's too complex politically also. It doesn't work. It doesn't provide, in fact, what we want or what they want. So today war are used, no surprise for you, with special forces, proxy or mercenary, and especially a lot of technology. Cyber, drones. And what is more striking right now is also more and more autonomous weapons. We can have a long discussion about what is an autonomous weapons, but what for us, the critical questions when we think about weapons, and we know that we will have soon, over the next coming 5-7 years, weapons which will not be bigger. Let me see if I have a glass. Weapons which will not be bigger than this glass, right? Which will be in a position to fly and to come in this room, have enough intelligence to do that without being remotely managed, and possibly choose who among us is the enemy and needs to be taken care of. So we will be soon confronted with weapons that will be able to make, in fact, decision-making and not just respond to a human impulse. Decision-making between, in fact, combatant, non-combatant, between people based on one clear view. Let's imagine, and I hope it's wrong, but let's imagine that these weapons have received a mandate to take care of an old, bold man in the city. So I'm looking around, so some of us have no chance, right? But the weapons will have to make some choices, right? And make some interpretation. What I found interesting is, and all experts are telling us that in 5 to 7 years, it's always difficult to know. What I found interesting is these weapons will be accessible and will not be very expensive. Which means for the first time, maybe you will have weapons with a certain impact, you can say almost mass destruction impact, and most likely will not be owned only by state. That's a big difference. And of course, for us, the key question is at the core of this weapon Who is the space for human being? Where is the human agency? Are we ready right now to, in fact, outsource the full decision-making for weapons beyond being remotely managed and decide, in fact, who needs to be killed or not? And of course, for an organization like us, the ICSC, we strongly believe that whatever the development is, we need to make sure that we have a human control and human agency. We are deeply convinced that a weapon, a machine, a system is not accountable by law, can't be. That human being needs to be accountable when it comes to war. And we know how difficult it is to keep human being accountable, but it's essential questions. And if I'm here also, it's not just to tell you this story, but it's happening, it's coming. It's also to reflect with you what type of dialogue do we have together. Because we're living in a period where state, and most of you know that, state these days do not produce any more consensus, or find difficult to produce consensus, let's say like that. And of course, the key questions is, when it comes to AI, and weapons, how do we regulate that? Who is in charge of making sure that we have a regulation, a common understanding? We've heard before from some of the leaders that we need to regulate a lot of questions, and there's a lot of ethical questions also when it comes to health, when it comes to, in general, design will have an impact on human being. I would argue, if you think about humanity, if we want to be serious about the SDG, we need to start and reflect about the impact it has on people when it starts with weapons. Thank you.